This broad calls up from the joint and she says she wants 2 feds whacked.
She could be extremely malevolent, intimidating, threatening. If you're trying to fake mental illness, wow, hearing voices. Everybody knows that when you're hearing voices, you have to be crazy. Okay, B, every day at noon, the devil tells me kill someone.
Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. She fleeced a host of banks and stiffed the finest New York stores for over $50 million. She was the consummate con artist, the queen of cons, a cross between Garbo and Grace Kelly with the moxie of a superhero. Her name was Lily Schmidt, and she had over 40 different aliases. She could morph without effort from helpless child to decrepit old crony to elegant Park Avenue socialite.
You could see Lily on a Monday and literally not recognize her on a Wednesday. She changes disguises as if she was a magician.
Lily was what is known as a paper hanger, a con artist who forges or counterfeits official documents, checks, securities, and passports. The first time Lily was arrested for forgery, she was sent to New York's notorious Rikers Island. She escaped by posting bail with a forged check. It took authorities 2 years to catch up with her. Lily ended up serving 2.5 years in the federal prison in Lexington, Kentucky. When she got out of prison, Lily headed for the bright lights of New York City. That's where she met and married Lenny, a felonious soulmate with a taste for luxury. What they lacked in scruples, they made up for in panache. Just when they seemed on top of the world, they were nabbed by 2 federal agents. Once again, Lily found herself in Rikers Island. Given how she had embarrassed them before with a forged check, this time she was refused bail.
Lily definitely rates in my top 5 as a very dangerous woman who, again, dangerous because she will not stop to further her criminal career.
It was while in jail that Lily raised the stakes. She engineered a plan to have the 2 federal agents who arrested her bumped off and make her escape. She was caught and charged with their attempted murder. Lily's legal defense: mental incompetence. She claimed she was out of her mind when she planned the murder. If it was true, Lily would be sent to a psychiatric hospital for 6 months instead of a federal prison for life. But was it true? Throughout her criminal career, Lily Schmidt had been assessed by a legion of psychiatrists and doctors.
You had half of the doctors saying she's got every illness known to man, and you had half of them saying she's faking.
Barbara Kerwin, a forensic psychologist, was given the task of determining Lily's sanity. Dr. Kerwin had a reputation as being somewhat of a fake buster. If Lily couldn't convince Kerwin of her mental incompetence, the queen of cons would be an old woman before she ever set foot in Tiffany's again.
When I first finally got in to see Lily, I was smart enough to bring a can of soda with me as kind of a peace offering. And in a correctional setting, chewing gum, cigarettes, soda is pretty hard to come by. I was rather surprised at her physical appearance because I had read a lot of the police arrest records. I had read the descriptions of witnesses who had been victims of her cons. I had seen some of the photographs, and they clearly looked as if they had come out of the pages of Vogue. She sort of looked like a wreck of her former self. You could see the bare bones of what must have been a devastatingly attractive woman, and that probably actually explains some of the power she had to get over on people. Lily was on to me much faster than I was on to her. And I could see in the beginning that she was starting to hustle me almost like a carny. Trying to find, I think, areas where she could garner sympathy, where she could make a connection with me, emotional hotspots, kind of the classic ones like, do you have any children? And then talking about the fact that she loved children, she wanted to have children, she had all these terrible miscarriages and rapes, which of course were never substantiated. She would talk about God. She would ask me if I believed in God. Did I pray? I was doing this difficult work of judging. Did I pray for infusion from the Holy Spirit? All in the service of being able to convince me, get me on her side, and make me go in there and do what she wanted me to do, which was to say, as the government's witness, this woman is worthy of sympathy and treatment. We should suspend her sentence and put her in a nice government hospital.
Lily talked continuously for 3.5 hours. She wept as she spoke of her abusive father and her terrible childhood in Bulgaria. She clenched her fists in rage as she recounted the injustices her family suffered at the hands of the communists. She recounted the joys and pains of her many love affairs and numerous marriages. But it was obvious the great love of her life had been her last husband, Lenny. When Lily and Lenny hooked up, it was a marriage of hearts, spirits, and criminal talents. Whereas each before was a small-time forger, together they aimed for the big time. Their plan was daring. Their target, one of the most secure buildings in the U.S., the Pentagon. While supposedly on tour of the Pentagon, they slipped through a cordoned-off security area and made their way to the office of Head of Security, Colonel Michael King. They filched his credit card and driver's license. Back in their penthouse, Lenny doctored the ID, made up a companion ID for Lily, and voila. Lenny became Colonel Michael King and Lily, his wife, Mrs. Courtney King. Then, armed with this impeccable Defense Department ID, Lily and Lenny set off to bite off as much of the Big Apple as they could stuff into their hungry mouths. As Barbara Kerwin assessed Lily's mental state, she was trying to determine if she was crazy or simply crazy as a fox. It would take all of Dr. Kerwin's savvy to know when Lily was telling the truth and when she was conning.
You could almost feel like you were living the pages of a James Bond novel. I mean, she had even conned the chief of security of the Pentagon. So, you know, it became almost fantastic, and you had to anchor it.
As Colonel and Mrs. Michael King, Lily bragged that she and Lenny bagged about $100,000 a day. They targeted banks and financial institutions, opened lines of credit and bank accounts, all of which gave them access to immediate cash. One of their favorite schemes was creating forged certified checks. Somehow they decided that $70,000 was a magic amount. Then they would go into a prestigious New York store, eye some expensive item, flash their Defense Department ID as Colonel and Mrs. Michael King, and pay for the items with one of their bogus $70,000 certified checks. Their lifestyle was that of a royal couple.
If I were doing marriage counseling with them, I would have to say that this was a perfect match. It seemed to be one of the few enduring human relationships that Lily had.
Lily and Lenny never realized that their dream world was about to fall to earth when the real Michael King began getting bills from purchases he'd never made and irate letters about lines of credit he'd never opened. He notified the Department of Criminal Justice. Investigators began tracking Lily and Lenny's exploits. They realized that most of their scams took place along New York's fabled Fifth Avenue, so federal agents handed out flyers to merchants and security officers in the area with a description of the pair. It was a Friday. As Lily and Lenny got ready, they had no idea what lay in store for them. Lily had the certified check with her. Lenny had a gun. It promised to be another typical high-stakes free shopping spree, but a security guard recognized them from the flyer. He called the law. Lily and Lenny sensed trouble before they saw it. They decided to abandon their plan and get away. Lily wanted to duck into a store. Lenny urged her to stay with him. Ironically, if she'd followed her hunch, she might have eluded capture. By staying with Lenny, she ran straight into the law. Lenny got away, but was picked up a few days later. Lily was sent to Rikers Island. This is when she planned the murder of the two federal agents, which is what eventually brought her face to face with Dr. Kerwin. Here's how it all unfolded. She knew that the same two federal agents who were spearheading the government's case against her also drove her to court appearances. She also knew that she had a scheduled court date on June 24th. What if, on that day, she could get rid of them and gain her freedom? She sussed out a fellow inmate who had mob connections. After some small talk, Lily mentioned she was looking to hire some hitmen. She offered the inmate a $50,000 finder's fee. Lily's contact bit and provided a phone number.
This broad calls up from the joint and she says she wants 2 feds whacked. Me and my boys have to do the job at this point. We're assigned to do this job.
Then she sketched out her plan. She knew every detail of how she wanted the hit to go down.
She was really the mastermind. It was a pretty slick princess here. She had us times, dates, places where these cops stayed, and it made it easy for us once we had the other stuff, which we had on ice already, to walk up on these guys and whack them right out.
When they stopped on that June 24th morning, the hitman would come at the federal agents quickly using silencers. At least that was the plan. The plan that would take Lily Schmidt from consummate con artist to consummate murderer. What Dr. Kerwin would have to determine was whether this was the plan of a crazy woman or a cold-blooded killer. June 24th rolled around, the day the two federal agents would be hit, and Lily would make her escape.
This broad, we call her Princess, she had us dress up as policemen, as cops. And we walk up to the car. Once we get the drop on the feds, we shoot them in the head. And we get in and we break her out of jail. This broad says to me, "Where's the regular guy?" And she's like, almost like shaken to death. I said, "What do you mean, where's the regular guy? I am the regular guy." She knew that the job that the two feds were whacked, that I was the guy.
During the car ride, Tony told her about the hit. how they'd come upon the federal agents as they stopped for coffee, how easy it had been to whack them.
She wanted me to run her enterprise. She needed a button guy. She needed a guy who could steal with a gun. All she could do was paper. Her and her old man did paper. So I told her, when we get done with this deal, we'll talk about other deals. We got to see the money. She didn't get no play from us until she got to the safe site, the hotel room.
Lily rejoiced over the success of her plan and bragged, "My idea was great, right? I told you those two were clowns, baby. 23 and 24-year-olds.
She wanted to know how we whacked them, how they took it. Did they die bad? I told her they die like dogs. They got it in the bubatsa. They got it right in the head. Quick. Shoot them right in the head. Make them die. She was excited, just crazy. Broad loved it. She loved it.
The hitmen waited for Lily's associate to show up with their $500,000. But the only people who showed were federal agents. They arrested Lily, Tony, and his partner. Unfortunately for Lily, the whole scene had been videotaped, and Tony and his cohort, it turned out, were federal marshals acting in an undercover capacity.
Well, there was one thing that Lily never really figured out, that I'm not Tony two times. I'm Bob Leshorn, Deputy United States Marshal in deep cover. And Lily just couldn't put it together, because it's the first time in Lily's life that she's ever been conned. The con got conned.
So instead of murdering two federal agents, Lily was arrested and charged with their attempted murder, which carried the same penalties as murder. Lily claimed that she'd been set up and that she was only kidding about killing the agents. Besides, she hadn't been in her right mind about the whole thing.
The truly mentally ill do not commit crimes with an accomplice. They don't have a collaborator like Lily had Lenny, or Lily dealt with supposed hitmen to take out the federal agents. Because the nature of severe psychotic mental illness is such that it alienates people from communicating with other people. So in that regard, Lily was making clear choices, and that's the issue of criminal responsibility.
So Lily was judged to have been in her right mind when she planned the hit on the two federal agents. But the con artist had one more con up her sleeve.
When I first saw her, we were talking about an issue in the past. Was she so mentally ill before that she shouldn't be convicted of the crime? She lost that round. She was convicted. So now we're at the next round, the last round. Is she so mentally ill that even though she's responsible for the crime, it's inhumane to put her in a prison? So now she has to become mentally ill right at this moment in time. So the mouse moved in.
Lily told one examiner that she saw a mouse walking on the walls of her cell. The mouse laughed at her and told her she was hopeless and that everyone was against her. "How pitiful you are," the mouse declared. That's when Barbara Kerwin persuaded Lily's defense attorney to administer the HSAS test, the Hidden Schizophrenia Attitude Scale.
The issue always in a forensic case is telling the fakers from the real thing. The difference about the HSAS is that there's very little wiggle room. You must choose between two alternatives, each of which is sort of bizarre sounding, may not describe your behavior, counterintuitive. The correct answer, so to speak, to either appear sane or to appear insane is not apparent, even in the wording of the statement. You will start with the sentence stem, about hearing voices, and you must choose either A, this is something that has never happened to me, or B, every day at noon the devil tells me kill someone. Now, if you're normal and you have no reason to want to distort, most likely you're going to pick A. This is something that's never happened to me. If you're trying to fake mental illness, wow, hearing voices. Everybody knows that when you're hearing voices, you have to be crazy. Okay, B, every day at noon, the devil tells me kill someone. I have given this test to hospitalized schizophrenics, and they looked at answer B, and one of them said to me, I don't know which way to answer because the devil does tell me to kill, but not every day it's at noon. He tells me that periodically on sort of every other Sunday.
Lily obtained the highest score anyone had ever had for faking.
Lily was not having voices tell her to kill federal agents. She wasn't having a delusion that the federal agents were trying to kill her and she had to do this in self-defense. Lily had a clearly articulated plan, and the goal was to suit her purposes of getting out of jail.
In the end, the judge decided that although Lily might seem to exhibit some of the symptoms of schizophrenia, her behavior was better explained as faking symptoms in an effort to appear schizophrenic. Lily Schmidt was sentenced to 30 years in prison for attempted murder.
Lily Schmidt is an extremely dangerous career criminal because she will stop at nothing. You get up in the morning, you get dressed, you go to work, whatever your profession is, you're proud of it. Lily is proud to be a criminal. If Lily gets to a telephone, someone's in trouble. This is the con's con.
She never grew up, and in fact, that's a way to look at Lily without perhaps romanticizing her, that she was like a willful, pampered, and very precocious child playing with the world and people's lives as if she were playing in a dollhouse. She will never have security. She will never have the family that she used to fantasize about. She'll have a penitentiary, an infirmary, a series of various jails as she comes through the 30 years of her sentence. And at some point in time, and this is the real tragedy, and when it really will hit her, is she will be nearly a 70-year-old lady given a suitcase and $30 and a set of clothes and put out on the street. And all she knows is conning. And we'll see what works for a 70-year-old con artist.
It is one thing to like and admire and even relish the escapades of a con artist, but when the ante is up to murder and the individual tries to escape the consequences through a psychological loophole, fascination turns to disdain. Lily Schmidt was a consummate con artist, but in the end, she couldn't con the system. The stories on Exhibit A are based on actual cases. The names of the victims have been changed to protect their identities. The names of the guilty are real.